Hi, I'm Karen.
And I'm Elise,
Welcome back to Poodle People.
where we talk about all things poodles.
Before I get to today's guest, I wanted to thank everyone who came to the Kentucky Poodle Parade. It is something that Elise and I have worked on for a couple of years, but we had terrible COVID timing. So it was great to see a lovely turnout of dogs and people, and to meet some new friends and have time to visit with old friends. So I totally appreciate everyone's effort. I just wanted to make sure I thank everyone who participated because it really means a lot to me. And I hope to see everyone again and more people next year, although we might be changing it because the end of November seemed really good when we were having that warm spell, but in reality, it was quite cold. So bravo to everyone who did brave that cold and joined us. Another bit of good news is that Emma has had puppies. She whelped 2 days early and it was really easy. Unfortunately, two of the puppies did not make it, so I have a very small litter of two beautiful, plump, happy puppies. One cream and one black, which is really exciting. So I just wanted to let you know that news before I get on to today's guest. Kelly Diehl is joining us. Kelly got her DVM from the University of Tennessee and started practicing at a busy emergency clinic in New Jersey. And after 1 year of emergency practice, she completed an internship at the Animal Medical Center in New York City. Really fabulous hospital if you are not aware of it. For those of you who are in Kentucky, I would kind of equate it to Rude and Riddle or Haggard Equine in terms of offering, state of the art, amazing care at a very, very high level. So following her internship, Dr. Diehl moved west. She completed a residency in a small animal medicine clinic at Colorado State University. And after finishing a 3-year NIH postdoctoral fellowship at National Jewish Health, she joined the staff of the Veterinary Referral Center of Colorado as the co-owner of the internal medicine section. After 14 years, she left private practice to pursue a career in science communication. She joined the Morris Animal Foundation in 2013. And we will be talking to her about both her career and the Morris Animal Foundation later. She is board certified in small animal internal medicine with an interest in gastroenterology and immunology. She lives in Colorado with her husband, 2 children, 2 cats, too many fish to count, and a lovable Labrador retriever. So I am very, very pleased to welcome her to the Poodle Podcast. Thank you. And now on to today's guest. Hi, Kelly. I'm so pleased that you are able to join me today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great fun being here.
Fantastic. So would you tell us a little bit about your background, just so that we get to know you a little bit?
Sure. I am a veterinarian by training, and I hate to say how long ago I graduated from vet school, but I was in practice for about 25 years before I decided to transition out of the clinic, got the job at Morris Animal Foundation as a science communicator, and I do some of the scientific programs, evaluations as well. And I've been here about 10 years, just over 10 years.
Oh, that's fantastic. So I always like to ask people early on so that we know, what kind of pets do you have at home?
I have two kitties who
Mhm.
are brother and sister. I have a Labrador Retriever who's getting up there in age. So we're dealing with all the geriatric stuff that comes with having a over 12-year-old dog. And my husband is really into fish. So we have quite a few fish, more than I could possibly count.
Okay, so I don't know anything about fish. So does that translate into multiple aquariums or are they in a large?
We have multiple. So we have
Okay.
six different aquariums, and some of them are really big, and others are kind of more what we think of for aquaria, right? Like
Yeah,
smaller aquaria.
yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Um, I bet that's kind of hypnotic, almost like watching a fire burn. You probably spend a lot of time watching fish swim.
And my cats love it, right?
Oh
It's
gosh,
like
I
cat
bet. Yeah.
TV, right? Yeah.
I didn't think about that. Yes. Uh, so, would you tell us a little bit about your role at the Morris Animal Foundation, how long you've been there, and kind of what you do, just so we have a little bit more than just your title?
Right. So I have been here, as I said, actually, I had to take that back because I used to saying 10 years and now it's just about 11 years that I've been at the foundation. And I do a lot of different things. Primarily, I am responsible for looking at a lot of our communications, especially if they're science related. So I would do work maybe for a specific donor and write a piece for them if they sponsored a study. I write most of the blogs that are up on our website. I'll help with some of the emails we may send out. I've done scripts for TikTok videos, so kind of a little bit of everything. But I also do some work in kind of the nitty gritty science stuff. I review a lot of the grant requests that we come in. I review a lot of the grant reports that we require from people that we give money to. I will do sometimes a conference and give a presentation. So, like I said, a really broad spectrum of different activities.
I think that's always fascinating to hear what people do because one of my, kind of subtexts with having this podcast is to remind people that there are fantastic careers with animals. Obviously, specifically with dogs for this podcast, but in general, I think it's important for people to remember that, you know, there's a big world out there and lots of different kinds of jobs, and you don't have to you can kind of imagine things.
Right, exactly. And if you had told me maybe even 30 years ago, this is what I would be doing, I would be I would have said, oh, no, 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 I'm going to stay in clinic. But life happens and we make, shifts as we need to for other reasons. And it's been a really, really great transition for me to do what I do now.
I think that's a really important thing to remind people, especially, young people are used to moving, but it's really not at all uncommon. I would say that I am on my third career, and it sounds like you are really on your second career, even though they are related, so you use those skills and change as time goes on.
Exactly. Absolutely. And it's not that I don't use my veterinary knowledge. I sure do every day, but I do it in a different way, right? Than I did it for years when I was in clinic.
Of course. So before we get too far along, I happen to know the Morris Animal Foundation because you fund the university, people at the researchers at the university where I work quite regularly. But for people who are not so familiar with it, could you give us a bit of a background on the Morris Animal Foundation and some of the goals um, that you deal with?
Right. Happy to. We were founded 75 years ago, a little over 75 now, by Mark Morris Sr., hence the name Morris, not Morris the cat, which sometimes those of us who are old enough to remember
Yes.
think it's Morris
Yes.
the cat. But so he started it. He maybe known to a lot of listeners because he was created kind of the first prescription diet, which is Hill's KD. So if you have ever had an animal that has had kidney disease, you know Hill's KD. Anyway, he and his wife were making this in the kitchen of their house, which was above their vet clinic. And to deal with dogs that he saw during the Depression that were developing kidney disease because people had trouble getting food, and what was left is the quality of dog food was really declining, and also dogs ate a lot of what people ate, and of course it was during the Depression, so it was really a difficult time. He sees a lot of dogs with kidney disease. He realizes it has to do with protein and the quality of the protein, so he makes KD. His wife, I said, decided, phooey, I don't want to make this in our kitchen anymore. And so he hooked up with a packing plant in Topeka, Kansas called Hills. And so that's where the name Hills comes from. So he hooks up with them. They agree to pack his diet, and we're off and running from there. And of course, they still do all kinds of diets. Well, what Dr. Morse also recognized is there was very little research being done to help animals. Plenty of research done on animals at that time, but it was to serve human health, not necessarily animal health. So he created the Morris Animal Foundation to provide grants to people because there wasn't funding out there to study diseases, particularly in dogs and cats. That's how it started. And of course, that also represented a time where more and more and more people, right, had pets versus livestock. And so off we go, 1948, 1950, we start funding our first studies. We added horses to our portfolio in 1960, around 1960. And 1967, we started to do wildlife. So we have a very big portfolio. And basically, we run calls every year for a variety of different species. We get proposals sent to us from around the world. We fund globally. And then we have a very rigorous process for selecting the best grants. We actually assemble experts. We don't do that internally. And they say, hey, here, we're ranking these. Here's the ones we think you should fund this year. And then we give funding out. As you mentioned, most of our grantees are based at universities, a lot at veterinary colleges, but we do others. But we've also given grants we've worked with the Wildlife Conservation Society. We've given grants to, some of the rescue organizations over the years. So we have a pretty broad portfolio of grantees. I actually got a grant when I was in private practice. We don't do a lot of those anymore, but I got one to conduct a study in my practice many, many years ago now. But that kind of is how we run. So we raise the money and then we give it out to others.
So let's focus on how you raise the money. Is there a small amount from the sales of Hills that supports it, or do you rely on donations?
Now we rely on donations, and that's a really good question because how Dr. Morris set up our endowment initially was he put royalties from the sale of prescription diets into our endowment. Now that we haven't gotten money from Hills for probably 30, 40 years now, quite a long time since that initial agreement ran out. However, it provided the seed money, right, to get going, provided our endowment. But the vast majority, we don't like to touch that. The vast majority of our donations come from just people. Like we have a pretty large group of people who know about us. We have a few corporate partners who give us money and may sponsor studies, but those are not our main source of funding. It's really just regular people.
Regular people like you and me.
Mm-hmm.
That is amazing. I can attest to the importance of getting a Morris Animal Foundation grant because I know that our researchers definitely we see a lot of early career or postdocs or PhD students really interested in it because it's a very good way for them to build their skills in a competitive arena that is not quite, an NIH kind of opportunity. So it's really important for them early in their career to be getting these kinds of awards where they can start building some data.
Right. And you make a very good point is we have different granting categories.
Hmm.
So we have experienced investigators but we also have fellowship training grants, which you mentioned. They sound exactly like what they're geared to do, which is to help train people in animal health research. We have FIRST awards, which are grants given to people who are beginning their careers, right? Need that boost of funding
Hmm.
to get some data, and then they can leverage that. And then we have pilot studies, which are really we call them the high risk, high reward category, which is they're a very like, hey, I got this idea. I need a little money to see if I can, if it works. Those are more loose as far as their requirements, right? You don't have to have preliminary data and some other stuff. But sometimes people take those, right? And then they go, hey, the pilot was successful, can you give us some more money? So they function in all different types of ways. And I'm glad you brought that up because we do fund a lot of early researchers.
Yeah. So let's focus a little bit on some of the canine research that you've done. I know that you are important in hemangiosarcoma as well as the golden retriever lifetime study. So let's save the retriever lifetime study and talk about some of the other um, canine programs that you can describe to us.
Right. So our portfolio, like I mentioned, is pretty big, and we have typically for years and years and years, we actually have what we're called open calls, which is you can come to us with any dog health problem, right, that you would like to look at. And we funded a lot of different things over the years. Sometimes we'll do a targeted call. And hemangiosarcoma was one recently where we broke out and we fundraised around a specific disease and said, hey, just come to us with your hemangiosarcoma grants. And so that was one case where and we're going to have another round soon because hemangiosarcoma is such a lousy
Yeah.
tumor and we don't know much about it. And so that is a special circumstance where, again, we might have a real interest in something and go ahead and fund that. We just went through a call where we decided to focus more on senior dog health. And we had grants sent in specifically focused on issues affecting elderly or older dogs. But most of the time, we have what's called an open call, which is anything, right? Everything and anything. And but again, sometimes we'll target. We have just to bring in another species. We're having amphibians and reptiles coming up soon for wildlife. So often we have an open wildlife, but this time we decided to do some species focus and we'll be listening to those deliberations here fairly soon. But I hope that gives an idea. Like we just like everything. It often reflects what's a concern within the research community. Like you can see trends, right, over the years. If I look at the titles of for a few years there may be something that's a problem within the community that people are very interested in. Cancer tends to be up there year after year, right? And it doesn't have to be hemangiosarcoma. There are lots of other cancers,
Right.
obviously, that affect dogs, and that seems to be a biggie. There's always a fair number of cancer grants that we receive. But again, we can see things kind of come up and down as maybe a new disease crops up. There are maybe treatments that a new treatment comes out and people want to look at it, right, a little bit more closely. So again, that can vary a little bit year by year.
Are you seeing like a trend in older dogs, like as we have dogs as part of our family and they are living healthier, longer lives with really good veterinary care? Are you seeing things like increased titles addressing things like osteoarthritis or other aging diseases?
We do, and you named one of them, which is osteoarthritis. Another one that has been really, I would say, prominent the last few years has been addressing cognitive decline in dogs
Oh,
as they
interesting.
get older. So we had a lot, I'll bet you we had more or as many grants in this past cycle that were looking at slowing cognitive decline, looking a little bit closer at it. Um,
I
but osteoarthritis too.
I have to admit, I wish I were qualified to be on your review panels because I would love to read those proposals.
Yeah, they're pretty interesting.
Yeah.
There's obviously cognitive decline is really important in people.
Hmm.
And we are seeing some people who are trying to, I mean, some of it is cognitive decline studies for the sake of the dog, but there's also some interest in learning whether dogs are good models for cognitive decline in people.
Right.
And so we're seeing some of that. And I know this is poodle people, but I'm sure people have cats. Cats actually may also be good models because it looks like they get forms of vascular dementia, which
Mm-hmm.
obviously people know about, the strokes, right? And but dogs actually have some changes similar to Alzheimer's in their brains. So really different. So we may have two different species, two different models of dementia in people, but that needs to be teased out more. But we saw a lot of that. People, how can we keep our dogs' brain activity good? Because that contributes often to euthanasia in older dogs, right? Like the
Right.
dog that doesn't, like, somehow loses house training,
Right.
begin soiling in the house. Um, Dogs that they don't respond to their owners, right? And it fractures that human animal bond because they don't recognize people. They can have sleep disorders.
Hmm.
And if you know people who have Alzheimer's, they pace. Well, dogs can pace too. And so, again, how can we keep brain health, their minds active as they age?
So is it sort of similar to the adage that motion is lotion, except activity in the brain is the lotion? Does that make sense? So keeping the
Yeah,
dog engaged in
yeah,
different things.
right. So, and there are some very good tools out there to evaluate dogs for cognitive decline, which is also a relatively new disease, right? Like,
Hmm.
I can say we've been talking about it in veterinary medicine for probably almost 30 years. But for a while, people didn't even know if it really happened. And a lot of stuff was like, oh, that's just normal aging. And it's not. We now know there is a syndrome. It does happen. It's not normal aging. Like, I think there's normal, and it parallels what we know in people a bit. So it's really interesting to see a lot of those studies. And some of it is recognition. We have somebody who's doing a study. They're just working on, sounds weird, but graphics to educate people that they want to develop some tools that they can give veterinarians. So you go to your veterinary office, and we've all seen those posters, right? Like, this is
Sure.
what dental disease looks like, or the heart with heartworms in a jar. Well, they're trying to do something that you would be reading while you're waiting for your veterinarian that would talk about cognitive declines, a little bit about arthritis, to recognizing those signs.
That actually sounds so practical.
Yeah, it's one of the practical studies. So we have a pretty big range. Like, we'll fund stuff like that, and we'll fund things that are real, like tissue culture on a bench, right?
Yeah.
And a whole range of different types of projects. If our expert panels feel that they are worthy. And we try to assemble a panel based on what we see grants coming in. So if we see a lot of cancer grants, well, we're going to get a couple oncologists right in there. If we see cognitive, then we need a few neuro people right in there, and psycho and people who deal behaviorists we might see. So we sometimes have to tailor our panels based on what kinds of grants are coming into us.
Yeah, I have to admit that I thought you funded more bench science and not really so much applied science. So that's really interesting to know.
Yeah, we do. And we'll do, we funded clinical trials, which if drugs, typically, obviously, different therapeutics will, but we do also do some bench research, which our researchers tell us is very important because there are not a lot of animal health focused granting agencies out there, and many of them focus, and this is fine, on like a clinical trial or something that's going to be right away, right? It's going to have a direct application to animal health, but sometimes you need those basic studies,
Mhm.
right, to answer questions, and that funding is really scarce for animal health researchers.
Yes. You are definitely a lifeline for a lot of equine.
Ah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Those guys don't have, right, a lot of funding opportunities. And we've heard that from the equine community over and over again. Like, well, you guys are the only ones who would fund something that's a tissue culture, let's say,
Right.
study versus, though we have done obviously some practical studies too. We've done some equine behavior, which is another area that a lot of people don't can't get funding to
Mhm.
study equine and equine welfare
Yep.
as it relates to behavior. And we have a wonderful donor. She's a retired veterinarian who that's her passion.
Oh, how
She
lovely.
worked, yeah, and she funds some small studies every year just looking at equine behavior.
Oh, I love that. Bravo to her. Um, so let's segue to the Golden Retriever Lifetime Study.
Hmm. Oh, that's a big one.
Right. Yes.
So for us, yeah, I just talked and waxed poetic about how we fund studies, and now I'm going to like blow that all up and talk about the Golden Retriever Lifetime Study, which is very, very different for us because we are actually managing that study. We've never done that really before, right? Had an in-house study that we are actually conducting, obviously with the help of 3,044 dogs, which is how many dogs were originally enrolled in the study. We have 2,000 some, I think like 2,700 owners and veterinarians. So you get the idea that some people had multiple dogs
Mhm.
in the study. And it was conceived originally as a cancer risk factor study because we know Goldens have a high incidence of cancer as cause of death. That was out there a couple decades ago, and it was of special interest to the foundation. And we thought, why not? We'll see if we can pull this off. And since we've started, there are a few large longitudinal studies that are going on as well, some of which we are collaborating with, or we provided, like, here, don't do this. Here's what we did wrong getting this going. At its end, it's a $33 million study, which is enormous for
Mhm.
us. I mean, just huge chunk of change over the last, let's see, we started enrolling in 2012. So we're getting into we're in our 13th year kind of now. And but it'll probably wrap up within the next couple years as we would expect the dogs to be aging out of the study. We we think we are providing, not we think, we know we're providing data on other diseases as well, and as our dogs age, it's also becoming, we've glommed on some other pieces to the main study, looking at particularly, you mentioned osteoarthritis. We have a cognitive decline questionnaire now that's added on. We have a neuropathology piece where this is kind of gross, but we ask people to donate their dog's brains
Mm-hmm.
after they pass. And we send them, we're working with the Mayo Clinic in Arizona on that. And they're looking at it again with in relation to Alzheimer's because we have behavioral data. So it's actually, we like to say sometimes it's kind of morphing into an aging study because we're capturing all these diseases in real time. And of course, we followed the dogs. They had to be between 6 months and 2 years of age when they enrolled. We follow them through their lifetime and capturing every year biological specimens, data, even if the dog's perfectly healthy, right? So we have years and years and years of data, years and years and years of samples. And then, of course, we see the dogs starting to develop disease. And especially if they have cancer, we collect extra samples. We have lots of tumor specimens from these dogs. So we have a really big bank now of samples that include, again, blood, urine, feces, hair, toenails, urine, and as well as all these extra tissue samples and lots and lots and lots of data points that are just questions, right, and answers.
So how is that implemented? Are people enrolling and then going to their regular vet and having them take all of those samples, the hair, the toenails, all of that stuff, and send it to you? Or are they
Yeah.
local to you?
No, they are all across the United States, and we had hoped to do that, right? We wanted enrollment that was
Why?
kind of dispersed.
Yep.
So, because we see regional difference, we wanted to capture if there were regional differences,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to cancer risk, right? So we know where these dogs live. We know where if they've traveled. We've had some people start doing GPS work, right? Like, how far are you from a Superfund site? That kind of
Right.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Water sources. So we have all of that environmental information. And we got lucky because you can't, if you're doing a longitudinal study, you can't really, you don't want to influence, right? People too much. You just let people come to you and sign up. And we got lucky that we had pretty even distribution. We have a dog at least, we only did the lower 48 states, right? So we have a dog in each state, at least one.
Mm-hmm.
And we have pretty good regional distribution as far as we use some of the CDC regional areas. So there's like the Northeast, the Southeast, Midwest, Rocky Mountain region, Pacific, right? And those are, sometimes we'll look at stuff regionally. We might look by state. We haven't done a ton of that yet. We have started to look at some of the environmental data, but so we just let people come. We also got really lucky, and I'm knocking on wood, that we did not say, oh, we need so many female dogs, right? We just let, again, people sign up. And we got a pretty good distribution at the start of intact males and females and spayed and neutered females and males. That has changed over time, right? Because a lot of dogs were neutered
Mm-hmm.
or spayed after they enrolled, right? Because we had some dogs at like 6 months of age. Some dogs were breeding dogs. They were show dogs. They had all different kinds of jobs, as we like to say. And so we got a little bit lucky in that too, because that was sort of helpful in having a distribution of different dogs. So anyway, that was kind of how it started. And when people wanted to enroll, they had to go to their veterinarian, and the veterinarians had to agree to participate, right? Because it's actually work for the veterinarians, right? They have to see these dogs, they have to collect all these samples, they got to package them up. They send them to our biobank, right? Some go to biobank, some go to, because one of the perks of the study is we give their blood work for free, right? So
Mm-hmm.
some have to go to a lab and get blood work run, and some get stored, and tissue samples go to different places. And we have a association. We have people double reading, looking at like the tumor samples, right? Because
Yep.
you want to be really sure there's agreement. on that. So that requires a little bit of coordination. So it's a lot of coordination on our part. That's really what we provide, is sort of that nerve center for where are the samples? Are they getting where they need to be? Contacting the vets. We send out packages, right, with all the samples and instructions and the sampling stuff. So they use our kits that we package in the office and send out to them to collect these samples. So it's a lot of logistics, right?
Right.
And that's what we provide, is logistics. We're the repository for all the data. So we have a whole team that just manages the data, because then the flip side is we have to be 100% sure, right, that if a researcher comes to us and says, I want 100 samples of dogs with hemangiosarcoma, and they have had a postmortem, right? They have to have a diagnosis, and we want all their samples. We then have to be able to generate that list, that pick list, as we call it, right? Contact the biorepository, make sure they're pulling the right samples, right? Match them up and send them to a researcher. So then you have those logistics, right? Is stuff coming back out of the biorepository, back out of our database. And we have to feel really good and secure about when we send that out to a researcher that it's all accurate. So it's a lot, like I said, lots of logistics, and we handle that.
So I have two questions that I want to get to. The first one is really easy. How many people are actually working on that? Because that is an incredible amount of things to be managing. So I imagine you have sort of administrative slash managerial staff as well as veterinary staff. So can you kind of
Right.
describe?
You're going to be surprised. We have like about anywhere between 8 and 10 people who do
I
that.
was actually afraid that you had a really small staff.
We do. We
Yeah,
have a pretty small staff. Now we lean hard, right, on the veterinarians and their like the their veterinary care team, their vet techs, right, to do some of that work. They're going to package all that stuff up. But then we have the in-house people who send out the kits, process the data, talk to people every day on the phone.
right.
Like, my dog's sick. What do I do? What do I? Sadly, now my dog died. What do I do? Right? How do I get a postmortem done? So they kind of do that, and then we have a data team
Mm,
that is processing all of these the pieces of information. I actually now help with some of that. So I will look through a dog's record when I'm working on deceased dogs right now, to see, like, okay, what was the cause of death? What did the veterinarian put down? What do we actually know? Because sometimes people, like all of us, we hear, oh, my vet thinks it's a tumor, right? Well, is that really true? Can we say that? Is there a high index of suspicion, a low index? Did the dog have a postmortem? So we double check all of that data. And that's what I'm working on now, is double checking all of that again, because our researchers really, really, really need to be
right.
sure that we're accurate.
Yeah, that's a lot of data points and a lot of management. Um,
Right.
it's amazing that you pull it off with such a slim staff.
Yes.
Inspiring.
My staff would agree.
Yeah, I'm sure. They are very highly skilled at managing those things. You can't keep all of that straight easily. You have to have a plan.
Right. Right. And we've definitely made, we had to pivot over time. We had to change laboratories at one time. We've changed our biobank,
When
which
you
was a
think
big thing.
the way that technology has changed in the past 12 or 13 years, um, has probably impacted you as well.
Right. We redid the whole interface
Yeah.
that people were using. We had to redesign it because it was just getting so clunky, right? The
Mhm.
old one, you can imagine
Yep.
using software from 12 years ago.
Yes, I can.
Yep, right. So that was unexpected, let's just say,
Right.
thing that we had to do a few years back.
So my research question, if I were a researcher, would be to like, I am dying to know if dogs in Kentucky also have very poor social determinants of health that are they dying in the same way that, or are they developing the same diseases that citizens in Kentucky are experiencing? So I would love for someone to look at that closely. I think that would be absolutely fascinating. Are you seeing anything that you can share?
Um, we have done, we did do a little bit of work with the University of Denver, looked at some social determinants of health in some of our dogs. And we have someone else who's going to expand on that because, and in fact, we have one person at Ross University, which is in St. Kitts, actually looking at that, but from a broader spectrum, not necessarily regional. However, your question could actually be answered because we know what dogs are in Kentucky, right?
Right.
We know we've got years and years of data from people, and we could do that. That study could be done.
Right. It could be. Yeah.
Hmm.
It would be interesting to see how much our human lifestyles, secondhand smoke, inactivity, all of the things that I am acutely aware of, having lived in Kentucky for some years now, those things contribute to our high rates of disease, of chronic disease. And it would be interesting to know if that lifestyle also affects dog health.
Yeah, it would be. And we can answer like a lot of that because we ask those questions as part of this giant questionnaire, which so we talk about secondhand exposure to secondhand smoke. We talk about environment, like do you, where's what's your water sources, where like I said, we have dogs, we can use GPS to help us, we can use zip codes, right, to look at where dogs reside. We ask about exposure to carpet, flooring. Recently this came up for people, right? What's your primary cooking fuel?
Right.
We've asked that for years, decades. I mean, or, as long as the study's been going. We had some toxicologists help create the questionnaire. So we actually went to different experts too to help us create this questionnaire. Exposure to, like, does your dog swim?
Mm.
Where do they swim? How often do they swim? Temperature of the water, which actually gets to metabolism. Like at first I thought, why are we asking what the temperature of the water is where they swim? But it actually has to do not necessarily with toxin exposure, um, but really with metabolism because you expend more energy if it's cold water, right? And you're swimming. So that's a whole different thing. But we ask those sorts of detailed questions because we knew someday somebody would want to know, right? We know that laminate floors, for example, can off gas for much longer than we thought. And right, carpets are obvious because we can all smell it when we get new carpet. And yeah, so all of that exposure data, that's all sitting there waiting for someone to look at.
Is anyone, so laminate flooring is my, I despise it. Um, like I have this personal thing. I think it contributes to, this is my non-scientific guess, but I think that the proliferation of laminate flooring is not good for dog hind ends. And that is just watching my dogs scramble on it and knowing that as Americans, that's what we continue to choose. Are you seeing those kinds of interest in those kinds of things as well? Are you seeing researchers ask specific questions about things like that?
um, you know what? Not so much.
Mm.
Yeah, what I would say if I had a say what I see the most of people's current interest in the study is they really, really, really want to find what people call liquid biopsy, right? So biomarkers of disease that show up way before your dog has a tumor. And So what we see a lot of research because we have that data, right? We have dog gets hemangiosarcoma, let's say at 9 years of age. Well, for 9 years, we've been collecting blood samples, right? When does something maybe show up? We have a lot of folks who are interested in, hey, give me this many cases of dogs with confirmed hemangiosarcoma, and I want their blood samples for the previous 5 years, right?
To
Before
see why.
diagnosis, because they want to look for stuff.
Yeah.
And the other thing we can provide is, though it gets tricky, is age matched controls that have not developed cancer. And we actually did a sub project a few years ago where we went to our cohort and said, hey, you got any older dogs that were not like too old for the study, but they're still alive? They had to be over 12. They had to not have a malignant cancer history. We want some blood for them because we need controls, right? And we don't have serial blood work, but at least it gives us a control population, because where we're running into sometimes problems is we had this is just an anecdote. We had a person in the Netherlands who's looking at our dogs, and they wanted to look for genetic, right? Like, is there a gene like we know about breast women, right? And breast cancer, right?
Mhm.
Your right? And is there a genetic underpinning? Also thinking maybe that could be bred out of Goldens. But she was looking, so she's like, I need this many dogs with hemangiosarcoma and this many age match controls. We're like, sure, here you go. And then we had to call her periodically over the last 2 years because we're like, oh, that dog that was 11 and didn't have cancer. Well, guess what? It got cancer. So we have to send you another sample because that one now goes into your cancer pile, not
You're,
normal.
yeah.
And so that's been a bit of a challenge to do, though. Again, we have some older dog data, and a lot of this data, a lot of the genetic data, if people know about the V Foundation, which is for human cancer research, they actually gave us a grant so that we could do a lot of our genetic studies. And that genetic work, which would cost people a lot of money to run, is actually free.
Oh,
So
wow.
we give it free to researchers. So we're like, don't bother doing this genetics. We got it already for you. We
Right.
got the raw data. You just take some money and go do some other stuff with it. So that's we're really proud to be able to, we're
Yeah.
still increasing that bank, but yeah, we're proud to be able to have that for folks.
It's absolutely amazing to hear about it. Really fascinating. Um, so one thing that I see, I actually work in proposal development, so I read proposals. And I have been seeing a lot of PFAS and PFOS, both calls and proposals. And I'm wondering if you are seeing researchers who are interested in that, and or if there will be a way to figure out if dogs have been exposed. Is that something you're testing or asking about?
I haven't seen a lot of proposals come in, but well, I guess the question is whether it falls under, because we do have some people interested in exposures, right?
Mhm.
And cancer, but that can be pretty broad, right? We have some people interested in heavy metal exposures right now, and volatile organic compounds.
Okay.
But they're not specifically like, I would expect us to have it, but I haven't seen one specific for that.
Okay. I mean, I think we can probably guess if we have PFAS and PFOS in our bodies, our dogs probably do as well. Uh,
Hmm.
so it's just interesting
Yeah,
thing.
we've seen some people actually interesting work done in horses looking at endocrine disruptors, right, in
Hmm.
writ large, and grazing, right? And they have some interesting stuff because it may link to equine metabolic syndrome. So we've seen some of that from those guys, but I haven't seen a PFAS one yet.
Okay, interesting. Um, so are there any? So as the golden retriever lifetime study comes to an end, what things are on your horizon? Will you just take a deep breath, or will you embark on another large study? How do you see things going forward?
Yeah, I think what we're thinking right now is no more big studies for a while because we are going to need to. We're trying to figure out too, over the next probably decade, right? Managing our repository. We're focusing on really getting out there and letting people know what we have. You don't have to be a veterinarian, right? We'll let people who do human focused research, they can have access to samples. The samples cost us a lot of money to maintain,
I bet.
which we are, kind of estimating, well, how long do we want to keep them? How do we pay for that, right? Because we're going to have to fundraise specifically for that. We're always going to need a team to administer, right? Send out the data. I mentioned generating pick lists and stuff like that. So we'll always have a few people. We actually talked not that long ago to a wonderful researcher who did the Women's Health Initiative. If you've heard of that, it was done out of University of Washington, and they're probably 10 or a little bit more years from when they closed it, but they're
Mhm.
still managing it, right? There's a small staff that still sends data and samples to people if they want it. So we know that we're going to be doing that for a while. And we have some in house capability now. We have some folks some epidemiologists who will write papers that we'll write, right,
Mhm.
out of the out of the foundation, which is not something we typically again do, but we will do that, and we're looking for partnerships because I think we're going to really try to accelerate the data analysis over the next few years because it doesn't do any good if it's just sitting there, right? And
Right.
nobody's really looking at it. So we're trying to find new ways to fund people to do that. We have some partnerships. We're working with the Royal Veterinary College in the UK. We're paying for actually a postdoc. So here's one example where we're actually paying for a person. We're helping provide salary. They have a really large group there that does these kind of epidemiologic studies. So we partnered with them, paying for a trainee. So we're paying for their salary, but they have to look at our data, right? Like that's the deal.
Mhm.
And with the guidance and mentorship of this really powerful group there. So we're looking to make more of those kind of partnerships.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. It sounds like you have so much data that people really could be studying all kinds of things for years.
Yeah, really. And I'm gonna make a joke, but it's not a joke to us. You know what? The messiest data, you think it's the environmental data, but the worst is diet, right? The diet data is really hard to sort through. And I
Um,
know people who do human health research and they think our data is like, most dogs eat the same food every day, right? But it's still really, it's the messiest data we have. And it's taking a lot of time to do what's called clean it. You probably know that term,
mhm.
which is, again, trying to look at what people write in and what category maybe that should go in. Do we have a big category, a small category, right? I will give my favorite example, which is dairy. Do you give your dogs any dairy products? And people, and some people are like, I just want to know if it's dairy, right? So you have dairy, big category. But then maybe you have cheese, maybe you have fermented cheese, right? Not cottage cheese. And then sometimes we have people write stuff in because they're not quite sure where it fits, but then you have to fit it in,
Right.
right? You have to put it. And so cleaning the diet data has been a pain. And I think we will probably have some data that'll be like big categories, like does your dog eat raw food at all, right? That kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But it would be nice to get granular in that. But that's going to take a while. And that would be something that we would be working on, right? Even after the study was
Sure.
done, we have data cleaning projects that need to be finished.
You are so glad that my dogs are not in there because I try to top dress their kibble with something different every day.
Yeah, it's hard. And like, even
Yeah.
if if you keep, I think people know for themselves how hard it is to keep a food diary. I
Yes.
will say people are better for their animals, there's no question. But it was, because that's always the 64,000, the $1 million question I get from people is just, what is the best not diet to feed so my dog doesn't get cancer, right?
Right.
And we can't answer it right now.
No.
We can't,
Right.
because we have to look at it. And the vast majority of our dogs eat kibble, so it makes up some percentage of their diet, right? So it's not as easy to say, are you, like, if you went to a person and you go, how much red meat do you eat? How much other meat do you eat? Are you vegetarian? Are you vegan? Are you dairy free? Are you gluten free? There's some big categories you could look at, but and then compare. But ours are going to be tough to compare because so many dogs eat sort of similar, if you look at it from a high level, similar diets. But we'll have some data, and it'll be very interesting, because we made people do it for years, right? Write down,
Hmm.
go look at the actual labels on their diet bag, or measure, which is tough for a lot of people, but they do it. Measure what they're giving.
People don't measure what they're giving.
Well, they do. But like, if you said you top dress, if I said, well, how much
Yeah.
do you give? For some folks, that's hard, but they do it. We have a lot of people who got, because they know they're going to get asked, so they
Right.
kind of watch it
Right.
a little bit differently. Yeah.
Do you have some people who are on a raw diet because that
We
kind of
do have a
matter?
few. We do have a few folks who do, but I don't think, I'm going to have to knock on wood with this. I don't think we have very many at all that are exclusive
Okay.
raw diets. We have a
Yeah.
lot of people who mix
Yeah.
some in. Um, and, it can depend a little on, and people change over the years, right? Because maybe their dog develops a condition, they need a prescription diet. So
Right.
they switch, or they have to do something different. We have dogs with, I mean, golden retrievers are allergic dogs. We have a fair number of dogs with allergies, and they have to be managed a bit differently.
Mhm.
But we'll see. But that's our messiest. It's our messiest bunch. Everything else is much easier for us. Even some of the conditions are much easier for us to tell researchers, right, if they come to us. But we have a few people, who have, I don't say they volunteered, but they're interested, and they may help with cleaning that data up.
So, as we kind of bring our fantastic conversation to a close, could you talk a little bit about how people could get involved in the research, either in supporting it or being aware of it? What would you suggest for our listeners?
Right. Well, definitely go to our website, which is moresoundwellfoundation.org, because we have a couple different newsletters that people can sign up for. We have one that's devoted more to the Golden Retriever Lifetime Study. And obviously, a lot of our participants are in that emailing list, but we have other people who are interested in hearing some news that's very tailored, right, to the study participants. We also have a monthly um, email for researchers or people interested in research, right? Where it will, not only can you find the upcoming calls and different research kind of examples and all the application process on our website, but this email will keep people up to date, like what's coming up as
Mhm.
far as our research opportunities, and anyone can sign up for those. And then the final one, we have something called Tips and Tales, which is our general monthly email that has, again, that same sort of flavor. Like, it'll link to a blog maybe that's of interest, it'll give some announcements, but those are more for our general donor population. We also have a quarterly, like, I don't want to call it a newsletter because it's bigger than that,
Mhm.
but a quarterly publication that comes out called Animal News. And in it, that's going to talk more about these are the studies we just funded. Here's a outcome that we have. Here's a interview with a researcher, what they're doing. Here's we always have an update on the study in there, a little one pager that sometimes we give more statistics in. So all of those are available for folks. We are on Facebook, obviously, we're on Instagram a little bit. We don't have a huge social media presence, though we are, most of our stuff, our biggest area is LinkedIn, right? Because that tends to be where a lot of particularly our researchers are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also where we reach out to them. But you can follow us on LinkedIn and we'll talk about that's where we'll put some kind of splashy sort of findings if we have them, and promote, again, our research and what's coming up. So you can find it there.
That's a really good tip because I don't think I follow you on LinkedIn, so I definitely will.
Yeah, definitely. And also, last on that, if you go to our main page, you can also look at how to donate with all different kinds of donations. We have people who donate via our tribute card program, which you can honor a deceased individual, and that can be a dog or a person. We've had people give a donation in honor of a person who's really into animals. We also have, you can celebrate a birthday. We have some people who run their own fundraisers for us, and they may have we have people who do quite a few in the golden community, right? And they'll have we're going to raise money, we're going to have this get together and we're going to raise money for Morris Animal Foundation. And so we have information on how to do that on our website as well.
Well, that is just fantastic. It's been so interesting. This hour has just flown by.
No.
I will have to invite you back on to catch up on more things because I feel like I could talk to you for another hour without stopping. But I want to be respectful of your time, and I'd just like to thank you for coming on the podcast to share some information.
Oh, I loved it. I love talking about what we're doing, and I so appreciate you inviting me to come on.
Oh, you are so welcome. It really has been a joy. It's so interesting. I follow the Morris Animal Foundation because of my work, which originally got me interested in what you do. And I think that the foundation is really unique. You are big, but so small, so few people. Yeah, you have a huge impact.
Right. Well, I knew about Morris Animal Foundation for years, right? Because as a resident, right, I think we in that community know it is one of the few places you can go for financial help, right? For research. And yeah, we're a mighty group of, I think we have 38 total people doing the whole mess. And that includes the study folks too.
Wow. Well, keep on doing it. It's really important.
We're hoping we got another 75 years in us.
Yeah, exciting. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, and remember, a poodle will change your life. Please remember to like us on your favorite platform, or even better, leave a review. We really appreciate it, and it helps us get new listeners. And if you have any questions you want me or Elise to answer, send us an email at poodlepeoplepodcast@gmail.com. If you're interested in my breeding program or are ready to be added to my waiting list, please visit my website at scotchcornerstandardpoodles.com, where you will find all of the relevant information and links. Thanks for listening to this episode of Poodle People. See you next week.